Good morning. Welcome to Charlie's Corner. Today we're going to talk about my great-great-grandfather, Nelson Alexander. Born in 1841. He lived to sometime after 1906. Not sure exactly when he died. But we'll talk about him, where he was, what he was doing between 1861 and 1865. And so grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's get started. So what was going on in North Carolina at that time? Well, this is the East Coast of the United States. This is Charleston right here, and this is Norfolk, Virginia. Nelson would have been right here. All right. Now, there wasn't many roads back then. Not a whole lot of roads, but there was a rail, and the trains ran from Charleston up through here, across the Sound, and then up to Norfolk. And that's what carried all supplies into Norfolk. It was a huge supply line going up into Norfolk. All right. The deep ports for the East Coast was Charleston and Chesapeake Bay area, Norfolk area. All right. North Carolina, these didn't have any deep ports, but the Union sent some ships down and they blockaded Chesapeake Bay and they blockaded Charleston. All right. Now, they needed to stop this railroad from getting supplies up to Norfolk. And so they couldn't come down. They had to go through Virginia, all of Virginia and part of North Carolina. They couldn't come from the south because they were up north. So how they did it was they needed to come in right here in North Carolina to the Albemarle Sound. All right. So let's zoom in on that. Okay, so the railroad come across, and remnants of that railroad is still here. All right, and then went up to Norfolk. And so what the Union was planned to do was come in and set up a fort right here at Manio to blockade the Albemarle Sound, and it gave it a point that it could launch attacks into North Carolina. And it did so. If the Yankees could get established here, they could take Elizabeth City, they could come in Columbia, Edenton, Plymouth, and then they could launch an attack on this, stop these trains from going up to Norfolk and supplying Norfolk with supplies. All right. Nelson Alexander would have been living right here. So Nelson Alexander was living in an area called Newfoundland. It's on the Little Alligator River. I'll show you in a minute. And farming. That's what everybody did. That was all there was to do. There was no manufacturing there. It was all farming. But they were smaller farms, and he didn't own any slaves. 75% of North Carolina didn't own a slave. And so they raised their own crops, sold them. They were subject to the tariffs that were on the cotton and on the corn. Anything they exported, they were subject to the importing tariffs. But still, North Carolina was sympathetic with the Union, didn't really want to secede until Lincoln told them, "Hey, I need you to raise an army so that we can send it down into South Carolina." And then North Carolina said, "No, I'm not going to do that." So on May 16th, Nelson went to Columbia, the town of Columbia, and put his little X. He couldn't read or write, so he had to put his mark, and signed up to fight for North Carolina. And on May 20th, 1861, the state of North Carolina seceded from the Union. So let's just see where did they go from there. All right, so Nelson Alexander, here's the Alligator River, And this is the Little Alligator River right here. And Nelson Alexander would have lived right up here at the head of the Little Alligator River. When he signed up, he would have gone on what's now Soundside Road around to Columbia, signed up there. This is the Scuppernong River. And then from there, all the men, about 180 of them, were shipped up to near Murfreesboro, which they go on here, and you go right up here, and it's right up here. All right, this is the Chowan River right here. And this comes into play a little bit later. All right, now from there, from Murfreesboro, a lot of the North Carolina regiments mustered there, and then they were shipped up to Portsmouth, Virginia, and just right up in this area. And so they waited there for orders. Well, the Union came down, and they came in and they attacked the Outer Banks, and so Nelson came down to Elizabeth City. All right, and then from there they were shipped down through the Albemarle Sound, came down, and they pushed the Yanks out. All right, then they wanted to build, it's called was Battery Huger. They Nelson Alexander was involved with the building of Battery Huger, and the Confederates built that to defend the Albemarle Sound, because if the Union can get into here and shut down these towns, then they had a place to attack, to stop this railroad right here that supplied Norfolk. So this is a very strategic area, and this is actually where Soundside Plantation is, right here. All right, and so he was involved with building Battery Huger right here. Then they went back up to Norfolk, and they waiting orders up there in Norfolk. And then after that, they were ordered back down to Murfreesboro. All right, because by then the Union had, when they were up there in Norfolk, the Union had came in, captured Battery Huger, and they were sending gunboats down here to capture these towns. All right, and then they were sending gunboats up this river, and that's what happened. Nelson Alexander came down here to Murfreesboro, they mustered here, and then they went over to meet the Yankees at Winton right here. 3 gunboats were coming up the Chowan River, and let's zoom in on this. All right, so here we have the town of Winton, North Carolina, and this is the Chowan River right here, and Murfreesboro is off this way, and so the 32nd would come down this. It would have been a road down here to the town of Winton. All right, and during that time, 3 gunboats, Yankee gunboats, came up, and they moored right here at Winton. Let's zoom in on that. Oops, back out a little bit. There we go. Okay, so the Yankee gunboats moored right here, and then Yankee troops came up Main Street right here. The Confederates met them. They fought them here in the town. The Yankees pushed them back. They ended up retreating back to Murfreesboro, and the Yankees burned this town to the ground. The whole town, they just burned it to the ground, and then they left. So after Nelson Alexander belonged to the 32nd Regiment, North Carolina, and Company A was Tyrrell County. And the guys he was fighting with in his company were brothers, cousins, fathers that all related, pretty much related. If they weren't related, they were friends, neighboring farms. These are people that in his age group that he would have known before the war, and now he's fighting side by side with these guys. He ended up going from there down to New Bern. The Yankees had come into New Bern, and so they fought the Yankees down in New Bern, Swansboro. He was they took part in the Washington campaign. That's the Washington, North Carolina. We call it Little Washington, and he fought him up there in Washington. All this is on the Pamlico Sound, the Neuse River and the Pamlico River, and I'll show it to you because a lot of it is swamp, and this is what these guys are moving through. Okay, is these swamps. Let me show you. All right, so here's New Bern right here. This is the Neuse River. Here's the Pamlico River. What we call Little Washington's right here. All right, and so you see the dark areas? All this is swamp. All this is swamp. And they would spend days walking through these swamps to get from one place to the other. And they were fighting the Yanks at several points. The Yanks were coming up in gunboats, and they would come down and sit on these points, and they would fight them from there. And the same thing coming up here. The Yankee gunboats would come up this Pamlico River to Washington, and they would be on these points right here and fight the gunboats that were coming up the rivers. There's a Episcopalian church in Chakawinity, which is right across the river from Little Washington. When they marched up to Little Washington to meet the Yanks, they stopped at that little church in Chakawinity, and attended Sunday service at that church. The whole regiment did. Very Christian people. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop here, and I will continue on the next video with the rest of the war. It's getting a little long. So join me next time, and we'll pick it up after Little Washington and see where Nelson went from there. You have a good day, and I'll see you next time on Charlie's Corner.